July 29th, 1945, Western Pacific. The horizon looked empty, until a shape the size of a destroyer rose from the deep. Sheets of water crashed off its steel hull, revealing something no Allied sailor had ever imagined. A submarine longer than a football field, wide as a warehouse, and hiding 3 fully armed bombers inside a sealed hangar. The Pacific rolled away from the rising steel mountain, exposing its tower, its catapult rail, its curved hangar doors, and the silent men who climbed out into the newborn sunlight as if surfacing from another world. Captain Tatsunosuke Ariazumi stood at the top of the conning tower, the salt wind cutting across his face. For a moment he let his eyes wander over the long, gleaming deck of I-401, pride flickering beneath his stern expression. The Empire was collapsing, the skies filled with American B-29s, the seas swarmed by enemy carriers. But here, hidden in the endless blue, Japan still held a weapon the Allies had never seen. A vessel designed to strike from beyond imagination, a submarine that carried its own air force. Below him, sailors unlatched safety chains, checked the hangar pressure valves, and scanned the distant waves for silhouettes. Every movement was silent, disciplined, sharpened by months of secrecy. They had trained for this moment in darkness, behind locked doors, under orders so strict that even the Imperial Navy barely spoke the I-400 name aloud. The crew knew the truth. They were not simply serving aboard a submarine. They were living inside a secret the world was never meant to witness. Inside the control room, red emergency lamps flickered as Lieutenant Commander Yasuo Fujimori inspected the final checklist. Sweat dripped from the overhead pipes, tracing thin lines down the bulkheads. The air smelled of oil, metal, and men who had lived too long beneath the sea. Fujimori's hands brushed across the clipped profiles of the Aichi M6A Seiran bombers stored inside the central hangar. Wings folded, floats removed, engines tuned to perfection. Each aircraft carried a single 800-kilogram bomb, heavy enough to tear open the fuel depots at Ulithi, where the Americans sheltered their carriers like eggs in a nest. Ariazumi climbed down into the control room, boots echoing on the metal ladder. "Report," he said. Fujimori didn't look up. I-400 surfaced 3 miles to the south. Both vessels standing by. Launch readiness is at 97%. "Good," Ariazumi replied, but his mind lingered on the missing 3%. Out here, that meant life or death. The submarine leveled itself fully, engines rumbling beneath the crew's feet. On deck, sailors tightened straps around the launch trolleys and prepared the catapult rail. The still-closed hangar doors loomed overhead, massive steel arcs designed to unfold like the shell of a giant beetle. Behind those doors slept the Seirans, Japan's last hope for a miracle. Ariazumi stepped back outside, letting the sun warm his face. He imagined Ulithi's vast lagoon, hundreds of American ships anchored side by side, carriers, destroyers, supply vessels, an entire floating empire. Japan could never win the war, but a well-placed strike, delivered with perfect timing, could shock the Americans, slow their advance, and force negotiations. That was the dream Tokyo still clung to, and I-401 was the knife meant to carve that dream into reality. A lookout called down from the mast. "No enemy aircraft. Seas clear." Ariazumi nodded. "Begin launch posture." The order rippled through the vessel. Compressed air hissed as ballast tanks adjusted. Mechanisms clanked inside the hangar walls. Steam drifted upward from the exhaust vents, vanishing into the wind. Every man aboard felt the change, the submarine shifting into a stance not of stealth, but attack. In the hangar, sailors sprinted between tools and clamps. They unlocked stabilizer arms, inspected launch cradles, and checked the fuel lines one last time. Their movements were precise, almost mechanical. Months of rehearsals had carved the sequence into their bones. Fujimori ran a hand across the hangar wall, feeling the vibration of the engines moving through the steel. "This is it," he murmured. "This is what we were built for." Ariazumi stood on the deck, staring across the empty horizon. Somewhere out there, beyond thousands of miles of water, waited the strongest navy in human history, and he was about to attack it with a weapon they didn't even know existed. He breathed in, slow and steady. "Open the hangar." Metal groaned like a waking beast as the hangar doors of I-401 unlocked and slowly unfolded. The twin steel arcs split open along their spine, rising upward until the sunlight poured inside the belly of the submarine. For the first time in days, the three Aichi M6A Seiran bombers felt warm air on their folded wings. Mechanics rushed in beneath the widening gap, boots clanging on the deck, hands gripping wrenches, fuel hoses, and arming tools. The Seiran was not just a plane, it was a riddle of compact engineering, a war machine designed to sleep inside a steel coffin until the exact moment it was needed. Lieutenant Commander Fujimori entered the hangar at a jog, his voice sharp and cutting. "Move with precision. We have less than 40 minutes before American patrols sweep this grid." His men answered with brisk shouts and immediate action. The first Seiran rolled forward on its trolley, its wings still folded flat against the fuselage like a hawk waiting to spread its feathers. Engineers locked the trolley onto the guide rails and began the dance they had practiced so many times: unfold, secure, fuel, arm. Ariazumi stepped into the hangar and watched in silence. The sounds, the metallic clicks of wing locks, the hiss of fuel lines, the fastening of bomb shackles, blended into a rhythm he knew too well. Every movement had been rehearsed in sealed bases, behind blackout curtains, under orders to speak of it to no one. Even now, in the middle of the Pacific, the crew worked as if the shadows of Tokyo's naval intelligence officers were still standing behind them. "Wing lock secure," a mechanic barked. "Control surfaces free. Fuel engaged. Bomb winch ready." Fujimori checked his stopwatch. 8 minutes had passed. Good. They were on pace. The second Seiran moved onto the deck as the first was armed with its massive 800-kilogram bomb. The ordnance hung from the fuselage like an iron heart, dull grey, cold, heavy. Ariazumi walked beneath the aircraft, hand brushing the bomb casing. The Americans at Ulithi had no idea that somewhere out here, hidden beneath the waves, Japan had crafted a strike force capable of hitting them where they felt invincible. A lookout's shout sliced through the air. "I-400 signalling." Ariazumi stepped out onto the deck. 3 miles south, the silhouette of her sister ship, another titan of steel, another underwater carrier, rose fully into view. Her own hangar doors yawned open. 6 bombers between them, 6 weapons meant to change the course of the war, or at least buy Japan time. Ariazumi raised his binoculars. On I-400's deck, he saw men pushing a Seiran into launch position. The sight filled him with something strange: pride, fear, resolve. This mission carried the weight of a dying empire. "Return message," Ariazumi ordered. "Launch sequence continues." Back in the hangar, the third Seiran was being rolled toward the deck. The crew worked faster now, not sloppy, not panicked, but with the energy of men who knew the window between life and death was measured in heartbeats. Fujimori approached Ariazumi. "Captain, weather is holding, light wind from the east. Launch rails are clear." "Enemy patrols?" Ariazumi asked. "Nothing yet." Yet. That word lived in every man's throat. Ariazumi glanced upward. Clouds drifted thinly across the sky, harmless, beautiful, almost mocking. A perfect morning for flight, a perfect morning to gamble what remained of Japan's hope. The first Seiran reached the catapult rail. Mechanics fastened its wheels into the cradle, tightened clamps, and stepped away as ground crew connected the starter cable. The pilot, Lieutenant Tatsuo Katayama, climbed aboard, adjusting his goggles, steadying his breath. He knew the stakes better than anyone. If American radar picked them up mid-launch, he wouldn't make it 30 seconds before fighters ripped him apart. Fujimori leaned close to Ariazumi. "We could still turn back," he said quietly. "Wait for cloud cover. Hide at depth. Choose a safer hour." Ariazumi didn't look at him. His eyes stayed fixed on the Seiran's folded wing shadow stretching across the deck. "No," he said. "This is the hour fate gave us. We strike before the Americans believe we can." A gust of wind rolled across the submarine, lifting salt spray into the air. Katayama signaled from the cockpit. The engine coughed, sputtered, then roared to life. Vibrations shot through the deck. The second Seiran locked into its trolley. The third waited behind it. The I-401 was becoming something unreal. Half submarine, half aircraft carrier, a floating contradiction built by desperation and genius. Ariazumi raised his hand. "Prepare for launch." The crew froze in readiness. The Pacific held its breath. The catapult rail trembled beneath the weight of the first siren as the engine's growl reached full pitch. Lieutenant Katayama gripped the control stick, his gloved fingers tightening with each vibration. Ahead of him, 30 meters of steel track stretched toward open sky, ending at the edge of the world. Behind him, the I-401's deck crew stood clear, waiting for the captain's order that would commit them to the most ambitious aerial launch ever attempted from beneath the ocean's surface. Captain Ariazumi stepped forward, coat whipping in the wind. He made one last scan of the horizon. Nothing. No aircraft, no ships, no shapes cutting across the waves. Only the vast, indifferent Pacific. Perfect and terrifying. Because in this silence, the mission either lived or died. "Stand by," Ariazumi commanded. The catapult team lowered their hands onto the release mechanism. 3. The Seiran's engine screamed higher. 2. Katayama sucked in one final breath. 1. The release slammed forward. The Seiran shot down the rail like a silver arrow, wind tearing across its nose as the cradle hurled it toward the edge. At the exact moment the trolley disengaged, Katayama pulled the stick back. The aircraft dipped, then caught air, then surged upward in a violent climb. Spray burst beneath its belly as it cleared the waves by less than 2 meters before stabilizing into the sky. The crew erupted, not with tears or cheers, but with a fierce, controlled intensity. 1 plane off. 2 more to go. "Next aircraft," Fujimori barked. "Move!" The second siren rolled into position. Mechanics fastened clamps, latched wings, fueled the last drips into the tank. The pilot, Ensign Saito, climbed aboard, offering Katayama's disappearing silhouette a brief salute before tightening his harness. Ariazumi felt the weight of the moment settling deeper on his shoulders. If all 3 aircraft launched clean, they would rendezvous, drop to wave-top height, and push toward Ulithi in a low, silent glide. The Americans had so many ships packed inside that Lagoon, their radar operators often mistook friendly vessels for enemy contacts. It was the perfect chaos. But chaos worked both ways. "Captain!" a lookout shouted suddenly, voice sharp with tension. "Radio intercept. American patrol chatter detected to the west." Ariazumi snapped his head up. "Distance?" "Unclear. Possibly 40 miles, maybe less." 40 miles. At cruising speed, a patrol plane could close that gap in minutes. "Fujimori, launch now," Ariazumi ordered. "No delays." The second Seiran roared to life. The engine's vibration shook the deck plates as steam hissed along the catapult rail. "Ready!" cried the catapult officer. "Launch!" The rail slammed forward again. The second Seiran screamed down the track, lifting into the sky with a smoothness that almost seemed effortless. Within seconds it joined Katayama, forming a faint, distant pair of wings against the endless blue. The crew moved instantly to the third aircraft, but the air changed. the wind carried something different. A hum, a tremor, a sound no submarine crew ever wanted to hear while surfaced. A lookout called from the mast, voice barely holding together. "Aircraft! High altitude! Bearing 170! Ariazumi's heart jolted. American patrol plane, the worst timing imaginable. "Distance?" he asked, though he already knew. "Too close, sir." In the hangar, the third Seiran was halfway to readiness, fuel lines still attached, bomb clamps not fully secured. Launching now would be suicide. Waiting would be suicide. Diving would doom the pilots already in the air. Every option tasted like failure. Fujimori ran to Ariazumi. "Captain, what do we do?" Ariazumi looked at the sky. A tiny glint moved across the sun, growing sharper. A PBM Mariner patrol bomber, perfectly capable of tearing them apart. He made the only decision a commander of a dying navy could make. "Abort third aircraft," he said. "Close the hangar." The deck crew froze, shocked, almost refusing to believe it, but Ariazumi's tone allowed no argument. "Now." They scrambled to pull the Seiran back into the hangar as the massive doors began to close. Mechanics pushed with every ounce of strength as steel groaned overhead. The bomb swayed dangerously. Fuel sloshed in hoses. Sweat dripped onto metal grates. The Mariner swept closer, its engines a deep thunder rolling across the water. "Dive sequence!" Fujimori yelled. "All hands inside!" Alarms sounded. Crewmen leapt into hatches as ballast tanks flooded. The last hinge of the hangar clanged shut. The massive submarine began to sink. Seawater surged across the deck as the Pacific swallowed the I-401, dragging it down into safety, or a steel grave. Above, the Seirans continued toward Ulithi alone. The ocean swallowed E-401 in a single, suffocating breath. The massive submarine slid beneath the waves, disappearing into darkness while the thunder of the American patrol plane faded somewhere above. Water pressure tightened around the hull like a clenched fist, groaning through steel frames as the submarine descended. Inside, the red glow of combat lamps flickered against the strained, anxious faces of the crew. Men braced themselves against the tilt, gripping pipes and railings, listening to the hull creak as if the ocean were testing its strength. "Depth passing 90 meters, a petty officer called, voice taut with tension. Captain Ariazumi stood solid at the periscope column. "Level her out," he ordered. The bow lifted. The engines shifted pitch. At 120 meters, I-401 settled into uneasy silence, gliding through the cold dark. The submarine's massive frame shuddered softly, every plate and rivet whispering under the crushing pressure. Men exhaled in small, controlled breaths. No one dared speak above a whisper. Lieutenant Commander Fujimori approached, clutching a headset against one ear. "Captain, the two aircraft are still transmitting, weak but steady." Ariazumi didn't look away from the forward bulkhead. "Good, they fly for all of us now." The two Seiran bombers, Katayama and Saito, were alone, skimming wave tops toward Ulithi in near radio silence. Their fate was unknown, unreachable. The submarine could no longer support them. Its world was now steel, pressure, and the hope that the sky above remained empty of American hunters. Hours bled by. The distant hum of the patrol plane vanished. The ocean around them calmed. No sonar pings, no depth charges, only the low vibrations of engines and the heartbeat-like tapping of condensation dripping from pipes. Night fell. Ariazumi finally gave the order to rise, slowly, cautiously. The submarine crept upward through layers of darkness until the surface shimmered above like a dim ceiling. When I-401 finally broke through, it emerged into moonlit stillness. No planes, no destroyers. The Pacific was empty again, but the silence carried a weight nothing could mask. "Captain," Fujimori said quietly, "it's been too long." We should have heard something. Ariazumi gave a small nod. They both understood. The two Seirans might have been shot down, intercepted, lost in the vastness. Or they had reached Ulithi and struck, only for Japan to never learn of it. War swallowed answers. 3 days later, the message arrived that shattered what little purpose remained. Japan had surrendered. The war was over. Ariazumi read the transmission in silence, jaw tightening. Around him, sailors stared blankly, stunned by the words no one had believed they would live long enough to hear. For years they had trained, sacrificed, obeyed impossible orders. For months they had lived submerged, alone, unseen, carrying the last secret of a dying empire. Now that empire no longer existed. "Orders from Naval Command," Fujimori said, voice low. "All submarines are to surrender immediately." The control room fell into a hollow quiet. Men looked at one another, faces gaunt, uniforms worn thin, eyes filled with emotions none could voice. Ariazumi stood straight. "Prepare to surface. Set course for the Americans." When I-401 rose again, it did so not as a superweapon, but as a ghost. The hangar doors, once symbols of unthinkable engineering, now looked like the ribcage of a creature slain before its time. American destroyers found them weeks later. US sailors boarded cautiously at first, then with disbelief. They walked the deck, examined the catapult rail, touched the enormous hangar doors, inspected clamps meant to hold aircraft on a submarine. Many had served in the Pacific for years. None had imagined Japan could build anything like this. I-401 was ordered to sail to Hawaii, escorted, photographed, studied, the world's first and last submarine aircraft carrier. In 1946, the Americans scuttled her under Operation Road's End, sinking the steel colossus into black water. She vanished like the secret she had always been, silent, unreal, forgotten by time, but impossible to believe. The last shadow of an empire that built miracles too late to matter.